it's going to be pretty much an open conversation here. We've got a couple of questions outlined for our two panelists today. One is Benjie, and I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself. And then our other one is Travis, and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit. So Benjie.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. And I'm Benjie Peterson with Visions Audio Visual. And we're here just to discuss hybrid meetings and, safe options and, different ways to kind of go through our programs to understand that working through this process can be complicated. And, there's certain key components and tools that we hope to share with you. So as you leave here, you have some notes to move forward to make your life easier for your suppliers.
Yeah, and hey guys, my name is Travis. Much like Benjie just said, we're here to discuss hybrid meetings today. Myself and my Encore team have been doing hybrid meetings for about 10 years now. Obviously, they've only become important in about the last 18 months. But yeah, so I'm excited to run through this with y'all today and answer any questions y'all may have regarding them.
Awesome. Okay, we'll get started. First of all, let's just go with just the basic question. What is a hybrid event?
Sure. I'll jump in, and I'm probably going to say this a lot today, but it's a hybrid event isn't super easily defined. I mean, if we're going to define it broadly, it is a meeting where there's an in-person element and an at-home element, and there needs to be some level of handshake. But that can range in terms of solutions for your clients to something as, as simple as a Zoom call. If we have 5 people in a boardroom where we just have a laptop, or something as big as, a 500-person general session that needs a complete build out for a web page. And, it's, I would say that if we're going to be broad, we should just think of any meeting that has an online element with people in room, and we need to kind of, have 2 meetings running simultaneously. That's our hybrid meeting. Benjie, you have anything to add to that?
Exactly. Yeah, I piggyback off that. So it's like taking an in-person meeting in a virtual world and putting the 2 together. So, just much like Travis said, you want to have both components and make the people at home feel like they're a part of the meeting. So it's just as simple as making sure, obviously, the in-person meetings is taken care of, because if it goes good from there, then you transfer that same platform to the virtual platform. So how do you do so? You have different, softwares you can use. You have different plugins that several different companies use, like Zoom, like Vimeo, things like that, like Hopin and Feed Loop are these companies that have been popping up as of lately, but, they work. So it's just a matter of how do you use them and understanding the tools to use them to get those worlds to handshake. And that way everybody's talking and everybody's happy. Everybody can hear, see, and feel like they're a part of the meeting. Because I understand what I've seen a lot of people have a hard time with is the attendees feeling like they're a part of the meeting. So we try to put our focus there a lot, because a lot of times people feel like they're there, they're just watching like a fly on the wall. They're not really interacting. So going through the interaction is very important to, help clients walk through that process as well.
Great. So now, kind of leading off that, what are some of the things you need to host a successful hybrid event?
Well, we like to have a lot of platforms. So whatever platform you choose to go with is comfort level. I say Zoom and Microsoft Teams because I've seen and hear that a lot. So having a good platform to begin with, which is just like a landing page. So when you go to a website, it's going to pop up. So having that platform laid out and having buttons that clearly says general session, click here, breakout rooms, click here, exhibits, click here. So whatever portion of the meeting you want to go to, I feel like having a strong landing page is a good one to, give everybody the same URL so you can control it from the registration standpoint on down to the actual meeting. And it's the same URL, so not getting a bunch of different links and getting confused, because the less you give a lot of the attendees, the better, because that way they just go back to that same link and all we do is upload the platform. So platforms that you can use are vMix that intermeets between the person and the Zoom, because you have to have the right platform to do all the lower thirds and the subtitles to push that through to Zoom. So vMix is a good one. Hopin is a good one. Feed Loop is a good one. So those are some, softwares or plugins that we typically like to use. And Travis, I'll let you come in on that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think knowing the platform is critical. I would say even before that, though, from a client vendor perspective, the thing that you want first before anything is information on what the client is kind of looking to do with the hybrid meeting. So if we're talking about a meeting that's 5 people in a boardroom, probably get away with Zoom and piggyback off of laptops. If we're dealing with something like that general session, there's a lot of discovery questions that we need to ask clients in terms of, what do you want the interaction to be? Do you want two-way interaction with your attendees? Do you want, audience shots as well as on-stage shots? Do we want upvoters and word clouds? And there's a lot of questions, and I think it really just starts with understanding the client's story in terms of why they're doing the meeting. And from that, you can kind of make better, more educated decisions on, not only the platform, but, also the equipment. Because, we're a big ad that we haven't seen before 2019 is that almost every meeting has some kind of camera now. People really like that. Gotcha. Will do, Wendy. The one of the big ads that we're seeing for almost all meetings now is some kind of camera. People really like that visual stimulation of seeing the room, and it kind of goes back to what Benjie was saying. People want to feel like they're there, and if we can't give them an image of that room, if they're just hearing it, they're going to sit on their couch and forget the meeting is on while they're watching TV or cooking breakfast in the background. So I to kind of piggyback off of Benjie's earlier answer, it's understanding the level of engagement, and from there you can give better responses to what needs to be added to an event that maybe would have been previously in 2019.
So from a planning perspective, how much planning time do you need to feasibly have in order to create a successful one? Is that again dependent on what type of hybrid event they're going to have?
Yep. Yep. The smaller meetings, if we're just doing something like a Zoom call, for my company, we can put that on in a week. If we need to build out a platform, or if we're going to have to do something like Benjie said, like lower thirds and 50/50s. And for those of you who don't maybe know what that means, that's when you have sort of a content image here, a camera image here, and then maybe a background layer behind it. So you're mixing all of these different video sources to create one image that your client is getting as the final use. Obviously, those take more time. Those are higher production, more hands, more labor. So for at least from a Encore perspective, right now we're at a month lead time on larger hybrid meetings. But if it's something as small as like a Zoom call that we're just patching in audio and video signals to, we have the equipment to do that in a week.
Yep, and that's a good timeline as well. And I also suggest to do a lot of conference calls, especially on the higher end, bigger ones, because you need to get the proper information. And the issues come where it's not the actual production company that's actually producing it. It's everybody else that's trying to log on that's handling their own computer. So the time to just work through that helps a lot, because it's more so like, okay, do you understand your computer? And it's not like they don't know their computer, but it's difficult when it's on a Zoom platform or platform that they're not used to. So work through it, at least 3 days or a week before they go live to click on and make sure that, hey, the equipment that you have on your end is properly working. So you have your microphone and your microphone is working, and you have your camera and your camera is working, and then your video is working, and share your screen. And, things that people forget about, make sure your laptop charger is plugged in. I mean, these things actually happen, and you go, you lose the image and you'll think something else, and you look and the laptop died. So we went to do a bunch of other things, and it was just something simple as that.
Yep. And Benjie, if you don't mind me piggybacking again off of your answer, I've also had some scenarios recently where we've sort of had challenges between, sometimes people will utilize an in-house provider, maybe Visions, for the on-site AV. So the signals that are feeding you your images out to your stream, but then you use someone else like Cvent or another company for the actual platform and the streaming services. So if you're going to go that route, it's very important to kind of set yourself a roadmap to know who you're going to when something comes up, because if you're having an issue with the stream and you have 2 providers, it can be challenging to say, well, whose end is this on? So I guess maybe you want to put a PSA out there that if you are ever planning on using a separate provider for your AV and streaming services, just make sure you have contacts on both ends there, because you're going to want it for the day of the meeting.
Good points. Okay, now also within that, for what about equipment and execution in regards to creating a successful hybrid event? Like what kind of equipment, again, it's going to be dependent on what type of hybrid event you're doing, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yes, and the type of equipment can vary depending on, like you said, what type of event they want to put on. But I think the basic, microphones, projectors, speakers, mixers, a lot of video mixers help with that simultaneous feed with audio and video, because it's just sending one feed out from one source and you're plugging that into the actual platform. So the equipment doesn't change too much, especially for a hybrid meeting. Now if you're just doing just virtual, then it changes drastically. But hybrid, the equipment is pretty much the same. You will always order from a supplier for your RFP. So you still have your microphones, you still have your speakers, you still have your projectors, right? Then you just actually add another element for the virtual side. So from the equipment standpoint, just to keep, make sure they have the right video switchers, make sure they have the right, softwares and the right laptops that, I would suggest having Apple and a PC, because different formats and different content for the presenters that they like to present with can kind of not be compatible with certain systems that you're pushing through. So the equipment doesn't change much, just more so the labor and the build out on the virtual side. And clients can't see the virtual side being built, so they don't understand it because it's not tangible. They can't put their hands on it, they can't see them setting the screens and projectors up. So they're like, why is this labor cost here? Well, you have somebody on the back end working that's building that platform, that's giving you that look, that custom look that you want.
Yeah. To Benjie's point, there's a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes. I'm working on a hybrid event for June where we have 6 people running just the stream portion. That's the build out of the platform, the person in the virtual green room, graphics operators, and then I think 3 other individuals who are assisting those 2. So there's a lot of people that go into these. I will say that if we're, to get back to the question, if we are dealing with repeat groups, I do think it's important to let them know that there probably will be some additional equipment. Like if what we're seeing now is a lot of groups coming back who didn't do a 2020 meeting. They just kind of skipped that whole year. And what we don't want them to do is to come back to 2021 and think, well, my AV is just the same, it's just a stream, because they, like I said, probably didn't get a camera. And when you don't get a camera, you probably didn't do drape, you probably didn't do lighting. So there's elements, AV as a whole in room is always a system. And to do a good camera shot, you need something to light the stage because you want your subjects to be bright. And then you want somewhere for those shadows to go, which is typically drape. And then as Benjie mentioned, if we're doing lower thirds or stuff like that, we're probably upgrading their video switcher as well. So if this is a new group, the difference isn't that much between a between 2019 and now. But if it's an older group who already has expectations, I think we just probably need to set them up for the fact that they are going to see a different AV bill in order to accomplish these new things they're looking to do.
And that's key, managing expectations. That's where it all begins at. How do you want it to look? Do you want it to look, like this looks fine where we're on right now, but this may not be the look a client may want for a gala or, an awards dinner or something like that. So, managing expectations and also, of course, aligning that with their budget. So I feel like if you manage expectations enough, then you will kind of lead them along the process to make them feel comfortable as they understand, the process of what they're getting. And, they're expecting a Zoom call or they're ordering a Zoom call, but then they want it to look like they're on CNN News. So those things of managing the expectations are key.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to piggyback on that, are there instances where you would recommend a certain kind of Wi-Fi capacity,
Yes.
different sound quality within the sound system that the property has? I mean,
well, it's for the sound system. The sound system won't have much to do with the virtual side for the hybrid.
okay.
So the sound system in the room is going to only be acquainted to the system in the room. It's more so on the virtual side, the video segment of it. So you want to make sure that you have enough megs to download. We typically like to start around 100, hardwired internet lines. Try to stay out the Wi-Fi as much. That's key too, and let a lot of presenters know to try to stay as much away from the Wi-Fi as you can. Try to get a hardwired internet connection line, which means you have to have adapters because a lot of the newer computers don't just plug in the Cat5 anymore. You have a hard internet line that typically runs better. You don't have to worry about that buffering. You get that little circle that spins out in the middle of a presentation, and clients don't like that because they wanted to, just like in person, they wanted to run very, very smooth and very efficient. They don't like those hang up moments. So things like the internet connection and having a hardwired internet line can eliminate those to keep things moving the way they're used to as far as the in-person read for the virtual side.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, Wi-Fi is more critical than it's ever been to a successful meeting, especially when you have people off-site. To that point, though, it does bring up, there's lots of caveats to all this because we can think about we have a hybrid event. All of our presenters might not be on property. We might have some that are presenting from home, or remote presenters and stuff like that. So there's two levels to it. You need to think about Wi-Fi in the venue, but also home venue, or not home venue, home Wi-Fi. Because if that Wi-Fi signal is bad, it's at the presenter's apartment or house, there isn't a whole lot we can do other than contacting the ISP, internet service provider, and crossing our fingers. To that point, if that becomes a worry, and again, discovery question is always a great part of this, so we always want to bring this up with people. If we do have remote presenters, we could also, at least with Encore, and I'm sure Visions can as well, do pre-records. So if you want to have them pre-record that material, so we're not dealing with, what if Charter or Comcast decides to not work at 4:45 when they're going on, you can get around that by pre-recording that material. So again, it depends, but for the most part, yes, Wi-Fi is absolutely critical, and I think I agree. 100 megs is probably what you want to be for conference internet.
Awesome.
Cheryl, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
When you guys are involved, and both on-site or off-site at another property, how would you suggest that all the folks on this call, not necessarily directed to me and Lee, but how would you suggest that our people that are providing meeting space and meeting experiences on the in-person side, suggesting to the planner, you need to practice this. You need to have run-throughs. It's not just building your budget for the equipment and the labor, but you're building an experience that is simply what I found. It costs more because there's more involved in it. And in order to create a successful event, you do need some practice time, because like Travis was saying, you don't want to realize that your speaker is not going to be able to present from their home office or even their office. I mean, there's some office Wi-Fi out there that's really terrible. So how would you guys kind of coach the folks on this call and on this Zoom meeting to kind of walk through that discovery process and be able to say, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but have you thought about this?
Yeah. So I'm going to use one of Benjie's phrases that I heard him say. It's managing expectations. If you're doing, and I recommend always doing Zoom calls with people these days anyways, but if you're doing Zoom calls with people and you're noticing that their Wi-Fi isn't great, or that you're seeing stutters, or their audio isn't coming through, I think you bring that up. I think you kind of owe it to them to say, hey, this signal isn't great. And if we put this in front of 500 people after we've invested heavily, and trying to make this look amazing online, this one little thing could cause all of this to be worthless. And maybe that's not the verbiage you use. Maybe you don't say worthless, but you get my point. It's I think you just have to be honest with people about what they look like online, and if it fits the vision that you're looking to give to your clients. And asking those discovery questions. So, you can, I recommend just asking them, hey, do you have issues presenting from here ever? Does your internet ever go out when you're watching Netflix or something? Because, maybe they're older and they don't use the internet that much. And, when it starts streaming, it's just not going to work because they never do anything like that. So, I think you just got to ask those questions, and you just got to manage the expectations for what it's going to be if they choose to go with a lesser quality internet connection.
I agree 100%. You can't stress how serious enough it is to understand that this is just as important as us loading in and setting up and starting on time. We need to run through it in real time. So not only are we going to do a quick connection test, let's put the PowerPoints up that you're actually going to be using. Let's get in the position that you're going to be in when you actually present. So if you're, at home and you're presenting, then you're just going to try to go to Starbucks and present. Well, that changes everything. We need to run through it in real time. So we need to make sure that everybody's in position, in the position that they will be in showtime, because we all know when it's live, it's live. So we just need to make sure that we can control that environment just as much as we control it in person.
I think that's a great point. I know I had a colleague that was putting on a hybrid event, and they had yoga being done, and the person that was doing it from their house had to tape a spot so they knew to stand right there in that position so that you could see, because often during the practice they would be out of the camera view, and it was not going to work. So it's like finding out things like that. And practice is definitely, a rehearsal is definitely key to a lot of it, I think.
Yep. Rehearsal. You can't rehearse enough. And, it can get frustrated to clients sometimes because they're like, I don't have time for this. I have this and I have that to do. And we understand that as well, but it's just one of those things where we're kind of here now and it's what it is. So let's just make sure that we can manage the expectation and work with them along the way. Try to take as much off their plate as we can. We ask for a data report to get the attendees or the presenters information so we can contact them and work through that, work through those options with them so they don't have to get bogged down with calling and trying to figure out who's trying to log in and who can, who has issues and who cannot. And also have a technical support line. It's good to have a back, someone they can call just in case they have any, any issues. That works a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you do run into a situation, because I've had it before where in the example here, we were working with Sanjay Gupta from CNN, and obviously his schedule is insane. Like you got to pay the guy just to show up somewhere. So what we ended up having to do with him, and I've already talked about it, was this is where pre-records came in really good for us because we pre-recorded that content because we knew, asking Sanjay Gupta to be in front of his computer at 4 p.m. on a Saturday is it's like asking a high-powered politician to do it. They're probably not going to be there. Something's going to pop up. So if you do run into that situation where it's CEO, CFO, where they're constantly getting dragged around, I would really consider that pre-record option.
That's a great point. Okay, so now here bounces back to kind of something that you touched on a little earlier about having options so that live attendees can interact with virtual attendees. Can you explain options there?
Yeah, so there are several plugins that you have to use, and that would be more from a provider standpoint. That'll be pretty much the software that we build for that interaction. We use vMix to name a few. vMix, Daycast is good. Hopin and Feed Loop are all softwares that you may want to put on your RFP. So you have the capabilities to begin with to your suppliers, but those functions are virtual attendees friendly because they allow the attendees to be a part of it because you have multiple camera shots that you can pick and choose which ones you want to put up. So, we love vMix to, attach ourselves with that to move and use that process in that platform.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot you can do virtually in order to engage people. My software that we use is called Chime. It's a custom website that we build for streams, and you can do anything from like upvoters to something like a word cloud. So the presenter asks at the beginning, "Hey, everyone, explain to me how your day's feeling," and the more goods you get or the more greats you get, the bigger that word becomes. You can do live polling. I have if any of y'all work with medical groups, one thing I've found is that medical groups love live polling, especially for continued medical education, because there's a thing I found with them that they have a very hard time passing out CME credits now, because you have to verify when people were in or out of the meeting in order to pass them that credit. So live polling is good for that because it gives you a stamp where they are. You put one at the beginning, one at the end. They have to stay engaged because they have to listen to the content and they have to answer the 2 questions at the beginning and the end. So you kind of have everything wrapped into one there. The possibilities are almost limitless. If you can think of it, the internet and coding can do it. It is a brave new world as far as interacting with people online. So I would tell you to use your imagination. If you have an idea, we can probably do it. It's just gonna matter how we get there.
Awesome. Okay, so my next question is, now we're trying to manage expectations for clients. How do we do that when we need to discuss to prepare for the cost of doing a hybrid event, so that, you know, they're aware that there's going to be that additional cost associated with hosting a hybrid event before it gets to you to discuss with them?
Yeah, so it depends. I know I said I'm going to say that a million times, but it does. It depends. If we're looking for something that's more high end, I've seen AV bills from 2019 as much as double. But you know, if they're looking for something, you know, there's also cost effective options too. So if they're fine with a look like this, where we're just plugging straight into Zoom, you know, we have that capability where we would just replace your onboard camera and your onboard mic with the mixer and the camera in room, and that way you've at least got an image that you're showing to people. There's probably still going to be some increases in terms of the adapters in order to make that possible, and the camera that probably wasn't there in 2019, but it's not doubling. You know, it's not going from a $20,000 to a $40,000 show. So it depends. But I would say if you want to, if you're hearing things that make you think, oh gosh, this is going to be high end. There's sounds like a lot of moving parts. I would tell them that, you know, consider this a new show. You're doing the on-site show and the online show, and the cost for both is probably going to be pretty similar.
So basically, you know, you should almost say you need to be thinking about charging them the same amount as if you're in person versus virtual, because of the component of the other, almost.
Yeah,
right?
I would say so. I've worked with a lot of planners who've told me that they think it was like this is post like middle of the year, where they told me it was a mistake not to bill the same amount for a virtual program. They, you know, it really is. They're getting the same, at least, content. And I think planners need to value that the same way. Otherwise, you know, they're just going to drown in the new costs that they're getting from this. So if y'all are working with planners, please let them know. Don't do it's cheaper to go online. Also, you know, we don't want to incentivize people to go online anyway. We want them to come back in the building. So
exactly. And I second that. I would think that leading up to the point before they even like to go look for a supplier, take their past bill and add 25-30% to it. That usually helps to give them an idea of what it'll cost to begin with before, you know, the conversation even initiates to pick a supplier. As the RFPs are building from their past events, I've seen the bills go from 25-30% increase for a hybrid option from what they paid in a virtual option. But, you know, like Travis said, it depends on where you want to go with it. How far do you want it to go? Because sometimes the virtual component to do it like a CNN broadcast could maybe cost more than the actual in-person meeting. We've seen clients say that they actually spend more money because it's not that it's not justified. They just don't see it how they see a show. So it's a lot of the behind the scenes is where the cost comes from, because you have to have guys left and right building the software, continuously making changes, continuously logging in, continuously pushing that platform to get it to look the right way. So we've seen, you know, pretty high AV bills with the virtual side. It's definitely not cheaper.
So I have a follow-up to that. For the folks that represent the CVBs or the properties themselves, I'm thinking particularly as far as the Classic Center ladies that are with us today. Is it worth it for, you know, Carol Hall to have a conversation with her AV person prior to even talking to clients and saying, hey, just walk me through high-end option, mid-grade option, and low-end option, just so that you're also educating Carol about what's possible, and so that she's able to communicate with that planner before they even get too far down the road. I mean, what I'm finding is I feel like our folks we're adding at the last minute because we were reacting. You know, a lot of the changes that happened in 2020 were a reaction to what was happening, and us realizing, oh, we need to have a Zoom option or a live streaming option. But now it feels like we should be more purposeful. And that's, I think, why Cheryl and Maria were so excited to have you guys come on and talk about it, because it can be a planned thing and not a reactive thing. And so Travis and Benjie both, I mean, do AV guys get together and talk? Do AV gals get together and say, you know, we need to come up with these models so that clients can pick, you know, and be well informed in their choices? Because, you know, me, I'm going to say, I want a high end, but do I have 20 grand? No.
So it depends. So there's different kinds of platforms that people can use. If they're going to use a self-service platform, and just FYI, Encore doesn't do self-service platforms, but if you're using a provider who does a self-service platform, I think that is totally justified. If you're going to use someone like Encore who builds out the platform, and it's a kind of a very specific build to the specific vision of the client, I don't tend to love doing kind of broad visions. I would much more prefer to talk to the client directly and get that specific information so we can tailor it to their need. Because you can really get lost in detail when it comes to these things, and sometimes it may make more sense to highlight what's important to the client's vision and value points than just kind of give them a list of this platform can do XYZ through the rest of the alphabet. That's my experience. No one is going to turn you down in that case. If you say you come to someone and you need information on the platform, they'll work with you as best you can. But in my experience, it has worked better to have that kind of immediate contact with the end user, the person who's, the person whose opinion sort of matters at the end of the day with the event. That always works best for me.
I agree 100%. I think that's a great idea before you get to that RFP point, to at least speak with your supplier, especially if it's a supplier that you have a relationship with. That, y'all have done a lot of shows within the past, to, jump on the phone with them and say, hey, I'm getting ready to talk to a client, or I know I may be talking to a few clients coming down the pipeline about some virtual options. So can you kind of give me a small, medium, and large price? I think that's possible, to give ballpark figures and stay in parameters to, have a certain look. And samples and examples are good too. I feel like giving out a lot of examples of previous shows to say, okay, hey, this example is a $5,000 live stream. This example is a $10,000 live stream, and this is a $50,000 live stream example. I feel like having a good catalog of examples are good to be able to show clients that this is what it's going to look like, so there's no confusion. Because sometimes, it's hard to, get everybody on the phone at the right time when you have a client maybe on the phone and, they're getting antsy and they may, be looking elsewhere, and you need to tell them something. So I think that it's good to have those, parameters of cost that can kind of gauge of where you would be at the end. To also have those examples are huge too.
I agree. I think having examples would be amazing, because again, it manages their expectations, because this is what you get for this. And then if you want the caviar, it's going to be X, So yeah, an idea of having examples to show clients, kind of in a catalog, like here it is, and here's some ideas based on these 3 different types would be great. So that's a great idea. Okay, moving along here. What is a lesson learned that did not work out as well as you hoped, or that you just feel could be improved upon in regards to hybrid or virtual events?
Compromising time.
Yep.
Compromising time. I mean, I thought about that when my note blank is empty for that, because that's the number one. It's compromising time. You're like, I should have just, listen to the client and trying to work with them and say, well, we don't need to rehearse. It costs extra, $500. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, I would have paid that $500 out of my pocket to eliminate this, and it's just compromising time, and to, never compromise the time in the rehearsal space. You got to get a good rehearsal in there, and so, or sometimes maybe people might want to pop in last minute in the meeting and say, I want to talk. Mm-hmm. That's a disaster. I mean, when it works, it works. But then like they want to hop in last minute. Nobody rehearsed it, and then now we're in the middle of the meeting. We're just running good. Now we're in the middle of the meeting, telling somebody to click your mic, and then they got the head and the screen like this, It's like, what are we doing? But I think compromising time and the rehearsal time is one of our biggest lessons learned.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's the same for me as well. You got to bake in the time to make it successful. And that's kind of why we've implemented lead times. You know, right now we're at a month lead time on these bigger builds, because early days we were just trying to push them out. And I think it became apparent really quickly that when you're dealing with a lot of X factors of people at home, or, you know, audience members at home who you can't necessarily just walk up to and say, hey, you need to fix this way. It starts to derail the program. And once that online portion goes off track, the in-person goes off track, and then it's a nightmare trying to meld them back together. So yeah, you got to bake in the time to make it successful. And the other thing too is and Benjie's mentioned it several times, is you can't compromise on your operators and your the people building the program. You know, if the person with the stream's telling you that it needs 6 people or so to make it a successful stream, as crazy as that sounds, no, there's so much going on in the background that you don't see. It just looks like one finished product, and that's really what clients are paying for, is that seamlessness that those 6 people bring.
Okay, and my last question, one other great tip or final piece of advice for supplier council members on how to make these events successful?
I think a great tip to walk away from is I feel like we've been going over it. Rehearsals, time, putting the right information in the RFPs, so that leaves it doesn't leave any gray areas. I feel like that's key. You know, setting up the expectations from the beginning when you're hiring your suppliers, you know, letting them know what's expected, and dropping in a few specific software, you know, like Chime or vMix, the things that we know works, and request those things, because that way you know that you have the capabilities to begin with. Now it's up to the users to put it together.
Yeah. If I had to give one point beyond, obviously, rehearsals and making sure you have the time to do it correctly, I would say don't be afraid to think creatively with this. You know, there's a lot of things like word clouds and polling, which can be kind of reutilized in ways you wouldn't think normally. Like I said, with a lot of CME groups, we use polling now in order to pass out requirements related to the CME, which, you know, beforehand that was never a thing. But it's, you know, we're using that as a timestamp, not as a poll. So it kind of has 2 uses. So, you know, don't be afraid to look into these things and think, you know, could we use this differently? Could we meet a client's value point differently than maybe we traditionally would have?
Did anybody else have any specific questions for our panel? If not, Wendy wants to take a picture, so get ready for your rock star smiles.
I'm gonna count down 3, 2, 1 and snap. So let's start it. 3, 2, 1, snap. Oh, y'all look so pretty.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate
Thank
you all
you for
having us.
coming on,
Thank
Caitlin.
you.
That's fantastic.
And Travis and Benjie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your knowledge and just giving us some more advice on how we can be more successful in helping our clients in the future. So we really, really appreciate it. And we'll send out their contact information too, so you have their, if you need something else, or if you do have another question, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer it for you. And I think our next supplier council meeting is going to be in August. So we'll send out a reminder about that and what the topic will be later on. But everybody hopefully is registered to attend the June or whatever annual meeting. If not, it's not too late. Anything else anybody else wants to add before we finish up?